The faithful try again. That Watson and Swift mistook stars for other bodies. In the observatory 2193, Professor Watson says that he had previously committed to memory all stars near the sun, down to the 7th magnitude, and he's damned anyway. How such exclusions work out is shown by Lockyer, Nature, August 20th, 1878. He says, there is little doubt that an intramercurial planet has been discovered by Professor Watson. That was before excommunication was pronounced. He says, if it will fit one of Leverrier's orbits. It didn't fit. In Nature 21301, Professor Swift says, I have never made a more valid observation, nor one more free from doubt. He's damned anyway. We shall have some data that will not live up to most rigorous requirements. But if anyone would like to read how carefully and minutely these two sets of observations were made, see Professor Swift's detailed description in the American Journal of Science 116/313, and the technicalities of Professor Watson's observations in Monthly Notices 38/525. Our own acceptance upon dirigible worlds, which is assuredly enough more nearly real than attempted, concepts of large planets relatively near this Earth, moving in orbits but visible only occasionally, which more nearly approximates to reasonableness than does wholesale slaughter of Swift and Watson and Frisch and Stark and de Coppée. But our own acceptance is so painful to so many minds that in another of the charitable moments that we have now and then, for the sake of contrast, we offer relief. The things seen high in the sky by Swift and Watson. Well, only 2 months before, the horse and the barn. We go on with more observations by astronomers, recognizing that it is the very thing that has given them life, sustained them, held them together, that has crushed all but the quasi-gleam of independent life out of them. Were they not systematized, they could not be at all, except sporadically and without sustenance. They are systematized. They must not vary from the conditions of the system. They must not break away for themselves. The two great commandments, thou shalt not break continuity. Thou shalt try. We go on with these disregarded data, some of which, many of which, are of the highest degree of acceptability. It is the system that pulls back its variations, as this Earth is pulling back the Matterhorn. It is the system that nourishes and rewards, and also freezes out life with the chill of disregard. We do note that, before excommunication is pronounced, orthodox journals do liberally enough record unassimilable observations. All things merge away into everything else. That is continuity. So the system merges away and evades us when we try to focus against it. We have complained a great deal. At least we are not so dull as to have the delusion that we know just exactly what it is that we are complaining about. We speak seemingly definitely enough of the system, but we're building upon observations by members of that very system, or what we are doing, gathering up the loose heresies of the orthodox. Of course, the system fringes and ravels away, having no real outline. A Swift will antagonize the system, and a Lockyer will call him back. But then a Lockyer will vary with a meteoric hypothesis, and a Swift will, in turn, represent the system. This state is to us typical of all intermediatist phenomena, or that not conceivably is anything, really anything, if its parts are likely to be their own opposites at any time. We speak of astronomers. as if there were real astronomers, but who have lost their identity in a system, as if it were a real system. But behind that system is plainly a rapport, or loss of identity, in the spirit of an era. Bodies that have looked like dark bodies, and lights that have been sunlight reflected from interplanetary objects, masses, constructions, lights that have been seen upon or near the moon. In Philosophical Transactions 82:27 is Herschel's report upon many luminous points which he saw upon or near the moon during an eclipse. Why they should be luminous, whereas the moon itself was dark, would get us into a lot of trouble, except that later we shall, or we shan't accept, that many times have luminous objects been seen close to the Earth at night. But numerousness is a new factor, or new disturbance to our explorations. A new aspect of interplanetary inhabitancy or occupancy. Worlds in hordes, or beings, winged beings perhaps, wouldn't astonish me if we should end up by discovering angels, or beings in machines, argosies of celestial voyagers. In 1783 and 1787, Herschel reported more lights on or near the moon, which he supposed were volcanic. The word of Herschel has had no more weight in divergences from the orthodox than has had the word of a Lescarbault. These observations are of the disregarded. Bright spots seen on the moon, November 1821, Proceedings, London Royal Society, 2-167. For 4 other instances, see Loomis, Treatise on Astronomy, page 174. A moving light is reported in Philosophical Transactions 84:429. To the writer, it looked like a star passing over the moon, which, on the next moment's consideration, I knew to be impossible. It was a fixed, steady light upon the dark part of the moon. I suppose fixed applies to luster. In the report of the British Association, 1847-18, there is an observation by Rankin upon luminous points seen on the shaded part of the moon during an eclipse. They seemed to this observer like reflections of stars. That's not very reasonable, however. We have in the Annual Register, 1821-687, a light not referable to a star because it moved with the moon was seen 3 nights in succession, reported by Captain Cater. See Quarterly Journal, Royal Institute, 12-133. Philosophical Transactions 112-237. Report from the Cape Town Observatory, a whitish spot on the dark part of the moon's limb. 3 smaller lights were seen. The call of positiveness in its aspects of singleness or homogeneity, or oneness or completeness. In data now coming, I feel it myself. Et Leverrier studies more than 20 observations. The inclination is irresistible to think that they all relate to one phenomenon. It is an expression of cosmic inclination. Most of the observations are so irreconcilable with any acceptance other than of orbitless, dirigible worlds, that he shuts his eyes to more than 2/3 of them. He picks out 6 that can give him the illusion of completeness, or of all relating to one planet. Or let it be that we have data of many dark bodies. Still, do we incline almost irresistibly to think of one of them as the dark body in chief? Dark bodies floating or navigating in interplanetary space, and I conceive of one that's the prince of dark bodies, Melanicus. Vast dark thing with the wings of a super bat or jet black super construction, most likely one of the spores of the evil one. The extraordinary year 1883. London Times, December 17th, 1883. Extract from a letter by Hicks Pashaw, that in Egypt, September 24th, 1883, he had seen, through glasses, an immense black spot upon the lower part of the sun. Sunspot, maybe? One night an astronomer was looking up at the sky when something obscured a star for 3.5 seconds. A meteor had been seen nearby, but its train had been only momentarily visible. Dr. Wolf was the astronomer. Nature, 86, 528. The next datum is one of the most sensational we have, except that there is very little to it. A dark object that was seen by Professor Heiss for 11 degrees of arc, moving slowly across the Milky Way. Gregg's Catalogue, Report, British Association, 1867, 426. One of our quasi-reasons for accepting that orbitless worlds are dirigible is the almost complete absence of data of collisions. Of course, though in defiance of gravitation, they may, without direction, like human direction, adjust to one another in the way of vortex rings of smoke. A very human-like way, that is. But in Knowledge, February 1894, are 2 photographs of Brooks' comet that are shown as evidence of its seeming collision with a dark object. October 1893. Our own wording is that it struck against something. Professor Barnard's is that it had entered some dense medium which shattered it. For all I know, it had knocked against merely a field of ice. Melanicus. That upon the wings of a super bat he broods over this earth and over other worlds, perhaps deriving something from them, hovers on wings, or wing-like appendages, or planes that are hundreds of miles from tip to tip, a super evil thing that is exploiting us. By evil, I mean that which makes us useful. He obscures a star. He shoves a comet. I think he's a vast, black, brooding vampire. Science, July 31st, 1896. That, according to a newspaper account, Mr. W.R. Brooks, director of the Smith Observatory, had seen a dark, round object pass rather slowly across the moon in a horizontal direction. In Mr. Brooks' opinion, it was a dark meteor. In Science, September 14th, 1896, a correspondent writes that, in his opinion, it may have been a bird. We shall have no trouble with the meteor and bird mergers if we have observations of long duration and estimates of size up to hundreds of miles. As to the body that was seen by Brooks, there is a note from the Dutch astronomer Muller in the Scientific American, 75 251, that upon April 4th, 1892, he had seen a similar phenomenon. In Science Gossip, NS 3 135, are more details of the Brooks object. Apparent diameter about 1/30th of the moon's. Moon's disk crossed in 3 or 4 seconds. The writer in Science Gossip says that on June 27, 1896, At 1 o'clock in the morning, he was looking at the moon with a 2-inch achromatic Power 44 when a long black object sailed past from west to east, the transit occupying 3 or 4 seconds. He believed this object to be a bird. There was, however, no fluttering motion observable in it. In the Astronomische Nachrichten, number 3477, Dr. Brendel of Griefswald, Pomerania, writes that Postmaster Ziegler and other observers had seen a body about 6 feet in diameter crossing the sun's disk. The duration here indicates something far from the Earth, and also far from the sun. The thing was seen a quarter of an hour before it reached the sun. Time in crossing the sun was about an hour. After leaving the sun, it was visible an hour. I think he's a vast black vampire that sometimes broods over this Earth and other bodies. Communication from Dr. F. B. Harris, Popular Astronomy, 2398, that upon the evening of January 27, 1912, Dr. Harris saw upon the moon an intensely black object. He estimated it to be 250 miles long and 50 miles wide. The object resembled a crow poised as near as anything. Clouds then cut off observation. Dr. Harris writes, "I cannot but think that a very interesting and curious phenomenon happened.